I didn't expect to find him in my living room that night. It was almost 1 a.m., and I'd just gotten back from a really bad date. One of those that makes you wish you'd just stayed home with a frozen pizza and Netflix. I was tired, a little buzzed, and in a mood that made me want to disappear under my comforter for at least 3 days. So imagine my surprise when I opened the door and found my roommate's brother passed out on our couch. Noah. He was sprawled out, one arm hanging off the side, hoodie bunched around his waist, his shoes still on. The TV was on low, showing some late-night cooking show, and an empty can of beer sat on the coffee table next to him. It took me a second to even remember that my roommate Jake had mentioned his brother might crash with us for a few nights while he was in town. But I didn't expect that to mean tonight. And definitely not unsupervised in our apartment, while Jake was conveniently out of town for a wedding. Noah stirred when I closed the door behind me a little too hard. He blinked up at me groggily, then slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Shit," he mumbled. "You must be Ethan." I nodded, slipping off my shoes. "And you're Jake's brother, right?" He gave a sleepy nod, then ran a hand through his mess of dark hair. He looked a lot like Jake, but not. Where Jake was wiry and sharp-edged, Noah was broader, softer somehow, but in that casually athletic way. He had this sleepy voice, the kind that could probably talk you into anything at 3 a.m., just because it sounded like a secret. "Sorry," he said, standing up and stretching, his hoodie lifting just enough to show a slice of toned stomach. "Jake told me to make myself at home, but I didn't think you'd be back this late." "Bad date," I muttered, heading to the kitchen for water. Noah followed, leaning against the counter while I filled my glass. "Want to talk about it?" I snorted. "Not unless you want to hear about a guy who spent 30 minutes comparing our horoscopes, then left early because Mercury was in conflict with my moon sign." "Yikes." "Yeah, dating's fun." He gave a sympathetic wince. "Well, for what it's worth, you don't seem like your moon's in conflict." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I think." We stood there for a beat, just long enough for the silence to start feeling heavy. Then he pushed off the counter. "You mind if I crash on the couch tonight?" he asked. I didn't want to snoop around looking for the air mattress. "Nah, it's fine. Jake's room is open if you want it." He made a face. "Yeah, hard pass. His room smells like feet and protein powder." I laughed. "Good point." I turned to head toward my room when he said, "Hey, Ethan." I stopped. He looked at me for a second, like he was debating something. "You're not what I expected." "How so?" he shrugged. "Jake talks about you like you're his uptight roommate who alphabetizes his pantry. But you seem chill." I smirked. "The pantry is alphabetized. Don't get it twisted." He laughed, and I noticed the way his whole face lit up when he did. Something about it made me pause. "Well, I'll let you get some sleep," I said, suddenly feeling a little awkward. He nodded. "Night." "Night." I went to bed expecting to forget the conversation entirely. He was just Jake's little brother, crashing for a few nights, a nice guy, a harmless flirt probably. I wasn't going to overthink it. But that night, I had the strangest dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream at all. I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door clicking open, and someone stepping inside. At first I thought I was dreaming. I lay still in the dark, barely breathing. My room was quiet, except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint creak of the floorboards by the door. Then I heard it again. A soft step. The door clicked shut. My eyes were open now, adjusting to the dim glow from the streetlights outside filtering through the blinds. The shape in the room moved, slow and careful, like it didn't want to wake me, but also didn't want to leave. My heart picked up speed. I had a moment of fight-or-flight panic, unsure if this was some break-in or just... "Noah?" Silence. Then a soft voice, close now. "Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." I sat up slightly, pushing the covers down. "Are you okay?" He was near the foot of the bed now, standing awkwardly like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He scratched the back of his neck. I couldn't sleep. I blinked at him. So you came in here? He let out a breathy laugh, embarrassed. Yeah, it sounds creepy when you say it like that. I didn't respond right away. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. He wasn't drunk. He didn't look upset. But he also didn't seem like he wanted to leave. I don't know this apartment, he said after a moment. It's weird being in someone else's space. I guess I felt restless. I tilted my head. Jake's room too smelly? He gave me a crooked smile. That, and the couch isn't exactly great for insomnia. I nodded slowly. You want to hang out or something? Watch a movie? He hesitated. Then, honestly, I just didn't want to be alone. That hit different. I pulled my blanket back slightly and patted the other side of the bed. Come on, I won't bite. He hesitated for the briefest moment, then climbed in without saying anything else. He lay on top of the covers, hands folded over his stomach, staring at the ceiling. I stayed on my side, half sitting against the headboard, trying to act casual even though my heart was pounding. After a few seconds, I asked, You good? Yeah, he said, then quieter. I don't really sleep well these days. Nightmares? He shook his head. Nah, I don't know, being in your 20s, I guess. I laughed softly. Yeah, that'll do it. We fell into silence again. Not awkward, just tense. Like something was coiled between us that neither of us wanted to name. Can I ask you something? He said eventually. Shoot. You and Jake ever cross the line? That caught me off guard. What? No, why would you think that? He shrugged. Just curious. I turned to look at him. He still wasn't looking at me, just staring up, like maybe he was trying to figure something out in his own head. Jake's aggressively straight, I said. We're just roommates, friends. Noah nodded. He always talked about you like you were this mystery. Said you were, weirdly put together, and probably into guys but he never asked. I smirked. Sounds about right. So, are you? I paused. Am I what? Into guys. I let that hang in the air for a second before answering. Yeah. He nodded again. Cool. More silence. I should have left it there, but something made me ask, why do you care? He finally turned his head to look at me. His eyes were dark, unreadable in the low light. Just trying to get to know you. I wanted to believe that was it, but there was something in his voice, something that lingered a little too long. You trying to sleep with your brother's roommate? I asked, half joking. He snorted. You wish. And then he rolled onto his side, his back to me, pulling the blanket around him. I watched his silhouette for a long time, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened, whether this was just late-night weirdness or something else entirely. Eventually, I lay back down. I didn't sleep for hours, because part of me kept replaying that moment, his voice, the way he looked at me, and another part of me wondered what would have happened if I'd reached out. The next morning, I woke up alone. Noah was gone. My door was cracked open just slightly, and the light in the living room was on. I stayed in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. But the faint scent of his shampoo still lingered on the pillow beside me. Eventually, I got up, pulled on some sweats, and padded out into the apartment. He was standing in the kitchen, shirtless, digging through a cereal box with his hand like a raccoon. His hair was sticking up in every direction, and his hoodie from the night before was bunched up on the back of one of the kitchen chairs. He glanced up as I walked in. Morning, hey, I said, keeping my tone even. We locked eyes for half a second longer than necessary. Then he looked back down at the box. Sorry if I woke you last night, he said. I couldn't sleep. It's fine. You passed out eventually. Yeah. He poured himself a bowl of cereal and leaned on the counter. Thanks for not kicking me out. I shrugged, opening the fridge. Didn't seem like you were doing any harm." He nodded slowly. "Still, appreciate it." We ate in silence for a minute. The air between us felt heavier than it had any right to be for 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Like we were both trying to pretend nothing had happened, but also trying to read between every line. "You got any plans today?" he asked, glancing at me over his spoon. "Laundry. Catch up on reading. Maybe some errands." He nodded. "Cool if I tag along?" That surprised me. "You want to come run errands with me?" He shrugged. "I'm bored." "Jake's not back till tomorrow, and you seem more tolerable than sitting around by myself." I smirked. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." So we went. It was a weirdly nice day. Sunny, not too hot. We walked to the laundromat, grabbed coffee while our stuff tumbled in the machines, and just talked. Nothing serious. He asked about school, I asked about the bakery job he used to have back home. He told me he got fired for oversleeping 4 days in a row. I told him that sounded fair. By the time we hit the grocery store, it almost felt normal, like we were just two guys hanging out, killing time. But then we got back to the apartment. I was unloading the groceries when I noticed him watching me. Just standing there holding a carton of eggs, not moving. His eyes were doing that thing again, lingering a little too long. "What?" I asked, half laughing, half defensive. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. He just set the eggs down and walked off toward the couch. The tension simmered for the rest of the afternoon. Every time he walked past me, too close. Every time he leaned over my shoulder to look at my phone. Every time his hand brushed mine when we both reached for the same cup. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. It wasn't just me. There was something there. He wasn't just being friendly. He was circling something. Testing it. Testing me. And I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do with that. Later that night, after dinner and a couple beers, he flopped down next to me on the couch. We were watching something dumb on Netflix. Some comedy he picked that neither of us were really paying attention to. I could feel the warmth of his thigh against mine. His leg wasn't just touching mine. He wasn't moving away. Neither was I. Eventually, he said, "You ever have a thing for someone you weren't supposed to?" The question dropped like a stone between us. I didn't look at him. Just stared straight at the screen. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I think everyone has." He was quiet for a beat. "What'd you do about it?" I glanced at him, and he was already looking at me. This time, he didn't look away. "I ignored it," I said, "mostly." "And?" I shrugged. "Depends on the day." He gave a small nod, like that made sense to him. Then leaned back, resting his arm across the back of the couch. His fingers were close to my shoulder. Close enough to notice, not close enough to touch. But almost. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't stop replaying the way he'd looked at me. The way his question had hung in the air like it meant more than he wanted to admit. And the way he didn't move away from me, not even once. But he never crossed that invisible line either. He was circling it. Hovering. And I was starting to realize how much I wanted him to. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen again. He was already dressed, black t-shirt stretched across his back, sleeves hugging his biceps like they had no other choice. He had his phone in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. "Morning," he said, glancing over. "Hey!" I grabbed a mug for myself, tried to act casual. "You sleep okay?" He smirked. "Better than the couch. Your bed's pretty nice." I shot him a look. He just shrugged, grinning like he knew exactly what he was doing. Kidding, mostly. Jake was supposed to be back that evening, which meant it was our last full day alone. I didn't know whether I was relieved or disappointed. Probably both. We didn't have plans. We just drifted around the apartment. I worked on a paper, half focused. He messed with his phone, played some old school video games, raided Jake's snacks. Every now and then, I'd catch him watching me. Not in a creepy way, just intently. Like he was waiting for something. Or maybe trying to figure something out inside himself. Around sunset, he asked if I wanted to go for a walk. It was one of those late summer evenings where everything feels slower. The sidewalks were still warm, the light soft and orange. We didn't talk much at first. Just walked, side by side, like it was normal. Like any of this was normal. I used to do this all the time back home, he said eventually. Just walk around until it got dark. Cleared my head. I glanced at him. You got a lot on your mind? He didn't answer right away. More than usual, we turned onto a quieter street, and I realized he was leading us toward the park a few blocks away. Can I ask you something? He said as we crossed the street. I nodded. Do you think it's possible to like someone without knowing if they'd ever like you back? The question hit harder than I expected. Yeah, I said quietly. I think that happens all the time. He kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. It's frustrating. Yeah, we walked a little further in silence, and when we reached the park, we sat on one of the benches near the baseball diamond. The field was empty. The lights weren't on. Just this open space surrounded by quiet, like the world had paused for us. I'm not good at this stuff, he said after a while. What stuff? Figuring out how I feel, let alone saying it out loud. I looked over at him. His hands were folded in his lap, tense. He wasn't looking at me. It doesn't have to be a speech, I said gently. You don't have to figure it all out right now. He was quiet again. Then finally, he looked up at me, and this time there was nothing playful in his expression. No smirk, just something raw and honest I hadn't seen before. Have you ever wanted to kiss someone, he said, but you weren't sure if you were allowed to? My chest tightened. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes must have said everything. Because the next thing I knew, he leaned in, slow, hesitant, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. Our lips touched, lightly, like a question. When I didn't move, he kissed me again. Softer this time. Slower. Like he was scared it would vanish if he moved too fast. When we finally pulled apart, he exhaled, eyes still closed. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. And in that moment, I didn't care about what came next. I didn't care that he was Jake's brother. I didn't care if he didn't have a label for what this was. All I knew was that he was here, and he'd kissed me like he meant it. We didn't say much on the walk back. I think we were both scared of what the silence might mean, but also scared of breaking it. There was a kind of safety in not putting it into words yet, as if speaking too soon might undo whatever just happened. When we reached the apartment, Noah paused at the door, hand on the knob. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, just figuring out what the hell I'm doing. I gave him a soft look. You don't have to figure it out all at once. He opened the door, and we stepped inside. The room was still, the faint glow of the kitchen light stretching across the floor. Everything looked the same, but it felt different now. He hesitated in the doorway to my room. Can I? I nodded and stepped aside, letting him in first. Neither of us bothered changing. He climbed onto the bed like he had the other night, only this time he pulled the covers over himself without asking. I followed, sliding in beside him. We lay there quietly, the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. My arm brushed his. He didn't move away. Eventually, he whispered, I've never done that before. I turned my head. Kiss a guy, he nodded. Not seriously, at least. Not like that. How'd it feel? He was quiet for a long beat. Then, real. That word landed harder than I expected. He didn't say exciting, or scary, or confusing. Just real. And in a strange way, I knew exactly what he meant. I'm not going to pretend I've got this figured out, he said, eyes on the ceiling. I don't even know what this means for me yet, but That kiss didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel wrong to me either. He turned his head toward me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. No flirting, no tension. Just a quiet understanding. Then he asked, "Is this a one-time thing?" I blinked. "Do you want it to be?" He hesitated. "No, but it'd probably be easier." I gave a small laugh. "Probably." He shifted onto his side to face me, propping his head on his hand. "Jake's gonna be back tomorrow." "I know." "We're not telling him, right?" I paused. "That's up to you." His eyes searched mine. He'd freak out. "Yeah." He let out a breath, "but I don't want to pretend like nothing happened either." "I'm not asking you to," I said gently, "but we don't have to know what this is right away. We just take it one day at a time." He nodded, like that made sense. Like he needed to hear that. And then, without any hesitation this time, he leaned in and kissed me again. This one was slower, longer. He kissed me like he'd been wanting to for a while. And when we broke apart, he stayed close, his forehead resting lightly against mine. "You make this really hard to ignore," he whispered. "Good," I said. Eventually, he curled into my side, his arm draped across my chest like it had always belonged there. And for the first time in a while, I fell asleep with someone next to me, with his warmth tucked in beside mine, the rise and fall of his breath keeping rhythm with the quiet thud of my heart. When I woke up, he was still there. And that was when I realized this wasn't just a late-night mistake. It was the beginning of something I couldn't walk away from. We didn't get out of bed until almost noon. When I finally stirred, Noah was still asleep, breathing slow and steady beside me, one arm slung across my stomach like it was the most natural thing in the world. His face was soft, peaceful, his lips slightly parted, and for a long moment I just watched him. I didn't want to move. Eventually, he blinked awake, squinting against the sunlight. "Hey," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Hey." A lazy smile tugged at his mouth. "You're still here. You're in my bed, Noah." He smirked. "Right." We stayed like that a little longer, neither of us really wanting to break the spell. But eventually, hunger won. We dragged ourselves out of bed and ended up making pancakes in the kitchen like it was a regular Sunday morning and not the aftermath of something quietly life-altering. He didn't hover, didn't act weird. In fact, he was more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. He moved through the kitchen with a kind of ease, like the weight that had been pressing on him had finally lifted, if only a little. I watched him flip a pancake with his usual flair, making a face like he just performed a magic trick. "You're proud of that, aren't you?" I asked. He nodded, grinning. "Damn right I am." After we ate, we ended up on the couch, sprawled out, his legs resting across mine. I was scrolling on my phone. He was watching something on TV, but clearly not paying attention. His hand would occasionally land on my thigh, casual but deliberate, like he was still testing the waters but no longer pretending not to be. And then, around 3 o'clock, everything shifted. Jake texted, "Be home in an hour. You guys alive?" I felt Noah's body tense beside me as he read it over my shoulder. He pulled his legs back and sat up straighter, rubbing the back of his neck. "Shit," he muttered. "Yeah." He stood up, walking into the kitchen like he needed to move. "This is going to be weird." "We don't have to say anything," I said, watching him. He opened the fridge, stared inside for a few seconds like he was going to find an answer between the condiments. "I know. You okay?" He leaned against the counter, nodding. I don't know how to be normal around him now." "You've done it before." "Not after waking up in your bed." That shut me up. He wasn't wrong. I stood and walked over to him. "We can figure this out, Noah. But not all today." He looked at me then, and there was something different in his eyes. Not fear, not confusion, something quieter, like he was slowly accepting this was real. "I don't regret anything," he said. "I don't either. I just wish we had more time before everything had to get complicated." I nodded. "Yeah, me too." When Jake came through the door 45 minutes later, everything snapped back into place. Noah greeted him with a brotherly hug. I gave a casual nod. We made small talk about the wedding, the drive back, how awful the apartment smelled because someone, me, had left a half-full trash bag in the kitchen. It was like nothing had happened, but I could feel Noah's presence more than ever. Every glance, every time our arms almost brushed. And when Jake went to unpack, Noah caught my eye from across the room. No words, just a look. A silent agreement that whatever this was, wasn't over. Even if we couldn't touch it for now. The rest of the day felt like walking on a tightrope. Jake was his usual loud, easygoing self, telling stories about the wedding, making fun of how bad the hotel food was, throwing on a basketball game like nothing had changed. And technically, nothing had. But everything had. Noah was good at hiding it. Better than me, honestly. He leaned back on the couch, made jokes, acted like nothing was different. But every now and then, I'd catch him glancing at me. Not for long, just long enough for it to mean something. After dinner, Jake headed out to meet some friends. "You guys want to come?" he offered, slipping his shoes on. Noah shook his head. "I'm wiped. Maybe tomorrow." I hesitated for half a second, then said, "Yeah, I'm gonna stay in." Jake gave us a look. "God, you two are boring." And then he was gone. The apartment felt instantly quieter, thicker somehow, like the energy had been waiting for him to leave. Noah and I stood in the kitchen, leaning on opposite counters. Neither of us said anything right away. Finally, I broke the silence. "You were good today." He looked at me. "You mean fake?" "I mean composed." He nodded slowly. "You too." We stood like that for a while, both of us unsure of how to say what we wanted without making it heavier than it already was. But then he spoke. "I didn't think I'd feel this much," he said. I looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "I thought maybe it'd be a thing that happened once," he continued, "that I could forget it, or tell myself it was just curiosity. But now, I don't know." I didn't rush to respond. I just let him talk. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said quietly. "Even when I try." There it was. I stepped toward him. Just one slow step. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight, Noah. But I'm here. If you want me to be." He looked up at me, something soft and uncertain in his eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. I didn't have a perfect answer. I didn't try to make it sound poetic or simple. "We take it one night at a time," I said. "Like we've been doing." He nodded slowly, as if he was still learning how to believe it. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, not like he wanted anything more. Just to be held. I hugged him back, my hands resting on his back, his head against my shoulder. We stood there like that for a long time, both of us breathing a little easier for the first time that day. Eventually, he whispered, "I'm scared." "I know," I said. "But you're not alone." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his face close, his hand resting lightly on my chest. "Can I stay in your room again tonight?" I nodded. "Yeah." "Of course." We didn't kiss. Not then. He just followed me down the hallway, quiet and slow, like he was still figuring out what it all meant. And when we curled up in bed, just two bodies close enough to feel the warmth, but not the pressure, there was something in the silence that made it okay not to have the answers yet. Noah didn't need to say he wanted more. The way he held on said it for him. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that maybe this wasn't a mistake. Maybe this was the start of something real.